All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're completely rethinking the educational paradigm around language. We're talking about shifting our view of multilingualism from being some sort of problem or hurdle we have to manage to recognizing it as an incredibly vital, dynamic resource in the classroom. Honestly, if you work in education, this shift is going to completely reframe how you see your students' backgrounds.
So, let me ask you something, and it's a provocative question. Do multiple languages confuse learners and actually slow down their academic success? Well, for decades, the implicit answer in the education system was simply yes. But modern sociolinguistics, it tells a completely different, frankly, much more exciting story.
Because right now, there is just a massive gap between the rigid, old-school expectations of the past and the reality our students are actually living in. I mean, the 20th century norm was all about prioritizing one strict, legitimate language for schooling. But think about today's globalized classroom. Students are constantly navigating this rich, complex web of diverse linguistic, cultural, and digital resources every single day. In this quick 5-minute explainer, here's our roadmap. We're going to hit the monolingual myth, rethinking multilingual resources, mapping a student's repertoire, policies versus classroom realities, and finally, identity and student investment. Let's go! Starting with part 1, the monolingual myth, and unlearning those old assumptions. You know, enforcing strict English-only or target language-only rules doesn't actually help students learn faster. It literally just silences them. It's a total myth that learners need equal, native-like mastery in all of their languages, or that using their mother tongue is somehow going to delay their progress. The reality: the skills a student develops in one language actively wire their brain to support learning in another. It's called cross-linguistic transfer, and it's a game changer.
Moving on to part 2, rethinking multilingual resources, where we need some new vocabulary.
The Common European Framework of Reference for Languages radically shifts the focus away from what a student lacks and instead looks at what they can actually do. This brings us to plurilingual competence. This concept doesn't demand perfect, native-level fluency in 3 separate languages. Not at all. It's about having a dynamic toolkit. It's about how flexibly a person can mix and match all the words, the styles, the gestures they know to communicate and participate socially.
And that leads directly to translanguaging, allowing students to use their familiar home languages to plan an essay, debate a topic, or clarify complex ideas isn't a crutch, it's an absolute superpower. It drastically lowers cognitive overload and lets them tackle really tough subjects using every single communicative tool they have in their arsenal.
Okay, part 3, mapping a student's repertoire. Let's meet Amira.
Think about a day in the life of this 14-year-old student. At home, Amira blends Jordanian Arabic with her parents and throws in German with her siblings. Online, she is totally fluent in global English, slang, and memes on TikTok. Academically, she's navigating German for history and science, but she's actively using Arabic translation apps to grasp the core concepts. And on weekends, she practices formal Arabic script in her community. If our educational system only tests her formal German grammar, we are literally blind to this massive, rich web of linguistic intelligence she possesses.
Which brings us to part 4, policies versus classroom realities.
Now, European policies have actually evolved beautifully over time. We've moved from strict monolingual systems in the 20th century to the CFER in 2001, promoting flexible use, the Barcelona Council pushing a mother tongue +2 goal, and today's integration of CLIL, where subjects are taught across multiple languages. It looks fantastic on paper, but in reality, teachers are facing a massive disconnect. You're expected to foster all this wonderful multilingualism, but you're strapped with training, constraints, and standardized exams that remain stubbornly, strictly monolingual.
Finally, part 5, identity and student investment.
Why does all of this actually matter on a psychological level? Well, as researcher Bonnie Norton points out with her concept of investment, a student's motivation is deeply, intimately tied to their identity and their imagined future. Students don't just keep their languages in neat, separate little boxes. When your classroom actively validates a student's whole, diverse cultural background, they feel seen. And when they feel seen, they are far more willing to invest their emotional and cognitive energy into learning.
So here's the big takeaway I want to leave you with. How will you change your practices today to invite those hidden multilingual resources into your everyday teaching? Whether it's just letting a student brainstorm a project in their strongest language or analyzing multilingual signs around your neighborhood, you have the power to turn a perceived deficit into a tremendous dynamic asset.
Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.